Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I'm joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how's it going?
Hey, hey, doing all right. Happy to be here.
Excellent. And that's it. It's the two of us. We're going to talk about Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the latest animated series from Marvel Studios. We just finished watching this and we're going to talk all about it. Today is Friday, March 21st, 2025. And I guess we should give the spoiler alert for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. We're going to go into details on the show. So that said, let's kick it off. And Christian, you can take it away.
All right, thank you, Henry. All right, so Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man premiered on Disney Plus in let's see, February 19th of 2025. And once again, this follows Peter Parker in his high school years learning to become Spider-Man, getting bit by the spider, ha- having a mentor that takes him under his wing, learning how to fight, all your favorite Spider-Man things. So I guess before we get into this, let's talk about us growing up a bit with Spider-Man,
Hmm.
because for me, Spider-Man cartoons were a big part of growing up, and it felt like there was always a Spider-Man cartoon up. Feels like the I guess going back to even the '60s, it feels like there's almost always been some Spider-Man cartoon airing for the most part. Of course, so let me ask you, Henry, did you
Hmm.
grow up watching Spider-Man cartoons as a kid?
Actually, I did not. Yeah, so with Spider-Man, I definitely grew up reading Spider-Man comics. But animated Spider-Man, I mean, I may have caught some reruns of old Spider-Man, like 60s stuff,
Yeah.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. But yeah, that definitely wasn't part of my fandom. Like it really was comics and then um Spider-Man fandom came back in a big way with like the Tobey Maguire live action movies. But yeah, animation, not so much, subsequently, for sure, with, for example, the Spider-Verse movies and other Marvel animation. But growing up, not so much. I would say not so much.
Interesting, yeah. Because for me growing up, I would definitely catch reruns of Spider-Man with
Mhm.
the '90s. Occasionally, you'd see like some '60s here and there as a kid, uh, just watching, TV. But that '90s Spider-Man was definitely it was a good part of my childhood. I would rent VHSs from Blockbuster of it. I would catch it here and there on TV. I guess the problem also with watching TV back then, as opposed to nowadays, is Spider-Man was a very serialized show. The entire
Mhm.
season, same with X-Men, but the entire season would pretty much be like one big arc, which is really cool. But when you'd watch it, you kind of just watch reruns in here and there, and you'd be like, "This is part nine of like
Yeah,
20,"
yeah.
and you'd kind of always be in the middle of the show. I
Mm,
guess not too different from reading Spider-Man comics,
sure.
but that's how it was for me growing up. And I also agree. Like the Tobey Maguire movies were a real big like explosion of the Spider-Man fandom.
Hmm.
And I think since then we've also had a lot more Spider-Man shows.
Yeah,
I'd say
yeah.
one newer one that I did really like. I don't know how newer it is anymore. Is Spectacular Spider-Man. Um, I'm not even gonna look up the age and feel old right now, but I did watch that a little later in life. But I would say this is the new Spider-Man cartoon for a new generation.
There you go.
So, well, I think since is this your first Spider-Man cartoon that you'd say you've watched like a whole season of?
You know what? With my previous answer, I was going to say yes to that, but I just remembered that I did watch Spider-Man cartoons in the 80s. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I totally watched that show. I don't know
Hey,
why I totally forgot that, but I did watch that. And I watched it quite a bit and I enjoyed it. So there you go. Um, I have watched a fair amount of Spider-Man animation after all.
hey, all
Yeah,
right.
maybe not one season continuously. I probably watched it a lot like how you described it just now, where um, you jumped in mid-season and maybe saw the episodes out of order or something.
Mhm.
But I think all told, yeah, I for sure saw a full season.
Hey, all right. See, there's always a Spider-Man cartoon.
Yeah, there always is. Yeah.
Wherever there's a kid, there's a Spider-Man cartoon. Just wait.
Yes.
Um, so let's see. Were were you looking forward to this at all? I think there definitely was some buzz. This was something I remember seeing in the news as coming for like years.
Yeah.
Because back, I think I want to say it, I saw as far back as the pandemic as 2020,
hmm
because originally it was teased as the origin story to Tom Holland's Spider-Man and was going to be an
Yeah.
animated project within the MCU,
Yeah.
which especially back in 2020, I think we were all chomping at the bit for more MCU.
Yeah.
And so the idea was very promising. They kind of leaked out the picture of Daredevil in his black suit, the idea of more Spider-Man, especially pre No Way Home, when there was a lot of hype leading into No Way Home. This was the thing. But of course, over time, the project changed, and now we have something that, of course, is within its own original universe. So I guess going into the show, let's see, where were you excited? Would you have? I guess the question is, would you have watched it if we didn't really have a podcast to talk
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah, good question. I definitely was looking forward to it. But taking a step back, with the background you just gave, it reminds me that I attended a Marvel Studios animation panel at the 2022 San Diego Comic-Con where they did promote this show. Interestingly, they were promoting it under a different title. It wasn't called Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man at the time. They were calling it Spider-Man Freshman Year.
Oh, that's right. I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. I was just looking at some of my old photos. This might be kind of interesting to see. I actually took like photos of the screen where they like showed the title and everything. And it's almost like I got proof that this
Mhm.
this was called something else before, you know. Um and they showed some of the concept art and character illustrations and um, what the show ended up being seemed to fit with that aesthetic. It seems like they stuck with that same um, art style, and from the discussion at the panel, it seemed like yeah, even though the title was different, this was what they were kind of going for. Early years of Spider-Man, and and a different look. Like uh, it. You know, again, spoiler alert, but we do see the classic blue and red costume eventually in the season. But there are a number of different suits that Peter Parker wears in this season, right? And it's not uh, your typical Spidey suits, right? Um, so yeah, I saw the concepts for the first Spidey suit in the season, and that's very different. It's like a Spidey suit that we've basically never seen before. So anyway, that panel kind of hyped me up. And then a year passed, nothing. Another year passed, still nothing. I was kind of wondering where this show was. Did it get caught in like development hell or something? But then it did come out, and I have to say, like some of the excitement from that panel years ago kind of faded a bit, to be honest. Um, and I didn't watch the show when it was like initially released, but I did hear a lot of good things, and was always like planning on seeing it eventually. So I guess to answer your question, like, yeah, I definitely would watch this if even if we weren't like having a podcast discussion about it. So I definitely would watch it, and I would say this, like, I feel like Spider-Man content, particularly Peter Parker stuff, has there hasn't been a whole lot in a while. So there's, I mean, I love Spidey, and there really hasn't been a whole lot of new Spider-Man stuff in TV and movies. So heck yeah, I was very much looking forward to watching this show.
Ah, nice. Yeah, I think I'm probably in a similar boat where you hear about it initially. I wasn't at the panel that you were at, but I heard about it initially. I was like kind of hyped. And I was like, okay, this could be something different. It's on Disney, it's the new Spider-Man show, and I also love my Spider-Man. So you hear about it, you get some hype, you see some images, and then of course you don't hear about anything for years. So it does die down. I think the excitement now going into it is not really what it would have been a few years ago when we first heard about it.
Hmm.
But we did when this did come out, I did hear a lot of good things about it. I did hear, some real praises, and I thought it would be worth checking out. Without that, yeah, I guess it's hard to say whether I truly would have watched it without doing,
Mm-hmm.
doing the
Yeah.
podcast because you hear good things about it, and you're like, oh, okay, well, we have to do it, so I'll watch it, and then as you watch it, you get more into it.
Hmm.
But I want to say yes, I would eventually. I'd eventually get to it. Maybe not as it was releasing,
Yeah.
but all right. So I guess let's get into the show.
All right.
So let's start with let's see. Let's start with the beginning of the show. We were talking about this a bit. I think this is probably the big elephant in the room when talking about the show. Let's start with the beginning of the show.
Hmm.
Um so we might be starting a little bit more on a negative note, but
Maybe.
um we'll get yeah, of course we'll get to that. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
So episode 1 features Peter Parker, of course, getting bit by the radioactive spider. He's your young kid going to Midtown High. You see him with Aunt May, of course, and the big change happens where it's revealed pretty much immediately that Uncle Ben is already dead, and so the big Spider-Man origin is kind of radically changed at this point
Hmm.
because Uncle Ben's death is like kind of the big catalyst for Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man, like truly becoming the hero Spider-Man, even though he
Hmm.
gets his powers before.
Yep.
You see this all across Spider media. Everybody knows, even though they didn't really reference it in the Tom Holland movies. You kind of assumed that it happened just because that's such an important part of the mythos.
Right.
Um, but of course, he is dead immediately. And the second kind of big twist is that rather than getting bit by the big radioactive spider at Oscorp, um, the spider doesn't seem to be radioactive. It is from outer space. We start with this big battle between Doctor Strange and a symbiote, and the spider seems to be coming out of this portal and bites Peter. Rather than it kind of being a product of radioactive science, it's more of this space thing. Of course, we'll get into that later on. We already kind of gave the spoiler warning, but of course we'll get into that kind of they go back into that origin later on in the series. But what was your first impression watching this show? Episode 1, first impression watching it.
Yeah, good question. With any new Spider-Man project, you always want to know, like, is this canon? Is this not canon? Is this a different universe? Like, what Spider-Man is this exactly, right? So right away, it becomes abundantly clear that this is not canon. This is another universe. This is something very different than basically anything we've seen with Spider-Man before, right? And when I say canon, I mean canon can mean a lot of things, right? Is it comics canon? Is it MCU canon? But I mean, any kind of canon, I would say this is not canon because of the things you've said. Um, yeah, the classic origin story that a lot of Spider-Man stories originate from is not here. You know, Uncle Ben is already gone. Peter does not have powers, and yes, he does get bit by a spider and he gets his powers that way, but it's nothing like what we're familiar with, right? It's from like a portal, like we were saying, seemingly from outer space. It's not in some laboratory at Oscorp. Um, and Doctor Strange is part of this origin story somehow. So it's kind of like jarring, right? It's so different than what we've seen before. I try not to be too negative on it right away. I wanted to give it a fair chance, right? I wanted to be open to this new interpretation, particularly because of this. Like I was similarly put off the first time I saw Spider-Man Homecoming, because uh like this show, it changed things up quite a bit, right? Um the really interesting thing about the Tom Holland Spider-Man is um you could kind of argue the whole trilogy, the first three Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, that was like a whole origin story, right? So I remember being kind of put off by like, why does is he not having his like great power, great responsibility moment, right? This doesn't feel like Spider-Man to me. But then like into like Spider-Man No Way Home, you get that moment and a big payoff, right? And it's through Aunt May, which is unexpected. So it's kind of a surprise and it's awesome and it's so true to the Spider-Man character, all these things, right? So they were playing the long game there, right? And so kind of for that reason, I was like, okay, let's give this a chance. It's different. Let's just see how it plays out, right? So I was a little it was a little off-putting to see him have such a drastically different origin story, but I was willing to give it a chance. That said, I also noticed that okay, Doctor Strange is part of this origin, and when we see Doctor Strange, you actually hear the MCU Doctor Strange theme song. So that was a bit annoying to me because I was already thinking, oh man, like, is this gonna go like full bore into this connected universe? MCU doing their thing, Kevin Feige intervening like crazy. Um, and I was kind of hoping it wouldn't, but like right in the beginning, you get that. So I was like, oh shoot, this is gonna be like very connected. So again, the show was just starting, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a chance, but like I gotta be honest, with that first episode, I was a little hesitant, I was a little bit down on the show. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, me too. Like, you want to give it its fair shake when you watch it. You're like, okay, this is different. They've done the Spider-Man origin before. They want to try something different, but there is just a part of you that goes, "That's on Spider-Man. That's not how it goes. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And it's hard to, when I think like the origin is so ingrained and it's so iconic that you kind of see the like, oh, they've done the origin so many different times across different Spider-Man media that you could see the desire to try something new with it, but at the same time, it feels like there's something missing at the beginning.
Mhm.
And I think it's such an iconic story for a reason
Yeah.
that with great power comes great responsibility, and the way he learns that, and there are other places where it's told where it just like I think truly resonates. In the first Spider-Man movie, for example,
Yeah.
that when you don't see it, you're like, wait, what? Come on.
Yeah.
So, I was definitely also put off by the first episode. And but I will say as the show gets a little better or as the show goes on, it gets better for me. I think it
Mhm.
grew on me. I think once I kind of got past that initial idea personally that okay, this is something different. This is something new, but I think once it kind of fell back into being Spider-Man, it felt much more like Spider-Man.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Um because I think what we didn't really see in the MCU, um, uh, you know, quote unquote, wasn't a character, was the Osborns. Of course, you see Norman
Mhm.
in No Way Home, but
Yeah.
of course, he's from a different universe. So
Yeah.
they bring in the Osborns fairly early in, and rather than having him be an immediate friend of Harry's, like in the comics and many other Spider Man media, they show him kind of being taken under the wing of Norman, very in a very, very similar way to Tony Stark. You see him
Yes.
on the couch with Aunt May when he comes home.
Yeah.
You see them have the talk, and there's the same like kind of tech billionaire taking
Yeah.
notice it, figuring out that he's Peter Parker, and being like, okay, well, I want to help you and take you under my wing to show you the way.
Yep.
And to me, I think that's also when the show really started picking up is when they introduced Norman Osborn and Harry. They introduced him a little later in the series. So, I guess how did you feel about that? We kind of got about the way they kind of twist the MCU into kind of its own story. If
Yeah.
whether it's Norman specifically or anything else in mind that you have. Because we talked about the way that this was a connected universe. Doctor Strange appears at the Avengers theme.
Yeah.
You see the Avengers Tower in the distance. Like this very much feels like the MCU.
Yeah. 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 That initial Doctor Strange moment was not an isolated moment. There are so many MCU moments throughout the season. The one you mentioned is a big one where we're introduced to Norman Osborn, but it's kind of a misdirect, right? We're made to think it's gonna be Tony Stark because the scene is set so much like that scene in Civil War where Peter Parker's introduced. They even have the exact same song playing, and they're really trying to make the audience think it's Tony Stark. And then, oh, surprise, it's actually no Norman Osborn. So it is different, but they are playing up this whole MCU thing so much. So that was kind of annoying to me. And then, I mean, there are so many others. I don't think we want to get into too much detail, but Iron Man actually does appear later in the season, and when he appears, they play the Avengers theme song from the MCU. I mean, they're really hitting you over the head with this stuff. What else? There were Captain America references throughout.
Sokovia
Um,
Accords.
Sokovia Accords is mentioned numerous times. So there's just a lot of MCU stuff going on, and I really could do without like all of it, to be honest.
Oh, all of
I
it.
mean, yeah, I kind of do because I would have loved to see this show be really standalone. I get it. It's Disney Plus. It's a Marvel Studios production. Um, it's their brand. They can do what they want with it, but like I would have just loved to see them be free of that. And like all of that stuff kind of annoyed me. So let's just say that.
Mhm.
That said, what you're alluding to, the introduction of Norman Osborn, and to me, Osborn and really all the supporting characters in this show are all very interesting. Like Norman Osborn is interesting, Harry, um, Peter's
Lon
friends,
Yeah,
you know,
Lonnie, I think in
Lonnie and
particular.
Nico and Pearl and like the intern group at Oscorp and there's a really great like rogues gallery. So like I dig all that stuff. And yes, like the supporting group, like that's a big part of Spider-Man. Spider-Man isn't just Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man is his friends, his family, his enemies. You know, they play a huge part in Spider-Man stories, and the it's no different here. And I think like all of those characters are well, maybe not all, but most of those characters are very well done here in this show.
Yeah, I kinda like what you said where you mentioned that, like, it feels like the MCU, like, kind of, like, hitting you over the head feels a bit more like fluff, where it's like the best parts of the show were the parts that were specific to the show.
Yeah, yeah.
The parts that were Spider-Man, with
Hmm.
Norman and Lonnie and, the villains and, like, the parts that really stood out were it wasn't the fact that it was part of this bigger universe, it was Spider-Man
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
world of Spider-Man. So, I agree. I think on the bit of the MCU note, I feel like this could be a whole longer conversation, so I'll just say that,
Yeah.
um I didn't mind it in doses, but I do wish they turned the dial back a bit. I
Yeah.
think we said something similar with X-Men 97,
Oh, right. Yeah.
where it was fine every so often. I think we said, like, "Oh, it was cool when Morph shifted into another Marvel character,"
Right. Right. Right.
but, like, not when you really saw other Marvel characters, because you wanted to
Hmm.
see the X-Men, and I think it's kinda similar here, probably more so here than I think in X-Men,
Hmm.
where there's a part of me that kinda like is they're kinda throwing the interconnected universe right away, and you kinda see some bits here and there. Because I would say other cartoons definitely focus more on Spider-Man, and they kind of bring in the other heroes much later into the show. Whereas this one kind of takes a bit of an opposite approach, where it's like, well, all this other stuff's kind of going on with the Avengers. I think that like one thing I liked about the interconnected was like we talked about his intern. There was the intern class. I know that was kind of cool that it's like, oh, there's someone from Wakanda there. Amadeus Cho is there.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a nice little reference because they're kind of like little bits, but they make that I think is what really makes the world feel like an interconnected universe, like little kind of
Hmm.
nuggets
Yeah.
that don't really, feel important about a story. Like, yeah, sure, we'll just throw someone in from Wakanda in there,
Yeah.
and she's just another intern. But you don't really need to have another big hero appear and take the spotlight away from Spider-Man.
Right.
Because yeah, like I did really like the supporting cast. Were there any that I think stuck out to you? I think, but besides maybe Norman, or is
Yeah,
Norman the star?
definitely. Definitely. No, no, there are others. Before we get off of the MCU stuff though, just one last thing, like the appearance of the appearance of Iron Man was like maybe the most annoying thing to me because
Yeah, I,
like
I agree with you.
it's like can we have a Peter Parker story with Marvel Studios that doesn't involve Iron Man? It's like they have to have Iron Man with Peter all the time. I really don't get it. It's very strange. I think that annoyed me from the beginning, from, like, Homecoming. I was like, "Why is Iron Man so critical to Peter's story?" And, all throughout, like, the Spider-Man Tom Holland trilogy, Infinity War, Infinity War, Endgame, it's like it's I Iron Man is like his story is completely intertwined with Peter's story, right?
Yeah.
And then okay, so finally, like this is a different universe. We can leave all that stuff behind, right? But no, he's still in the show. It's crazy, and they're doing what we just talked about, like the Civil War reference, where you think it's Tony Stark, but it's not, and yet he still shows up later. It's crazy. So yeah, I don't get it. It makes me think, like, if you got into Marvel fandom through the MCU, you probably think that Iron Man and Spider-Man have like this long history. It's almost like a Batman and Robin relationship or something. But that like it's crazy like growing up with Marvel Comics, that was not a thing. Like the MCU made it a thing, and to this day, I like it baffles me. It's just weird that they continue to play up this connection where there really isn't a historical precedent to it. It's very odd. So I'm gonna stop ranting, but I just wanted to call that out. Okay, on to what you're saying. Other supporting characters. I really like the relationship between Peter and Nico, best friends. Um, so this is a relationship like I think Nico is almost like the replacement for Ned in this show, right? They're best friends, and and they just get along and they hang out like all the time, right? And yeah, I was always interested in like the Nico storylines, and like I thought they had those two characters had good chemistry. But really, like the whole friend group I was into, like Lonnie and Pearl, and there was kind of like this sort of like love triangles kind of thing, at least initially. Um, yeah, that stuff was like kind of classic Spider-Man, like the friend drama, right? That was good. I enjoyed all that stuff.
Yeah, I did really like the way they kind of approached the friend drama. I
Yeah.
think the way they set it up was that, he likes Pearl, and you think, "Oh, that's gonna be like, I guess similar to." I'm trying to remember the girl in Homecoming. Was it
Oh,
Iris?
no, no. I
No.
think Liz, I think her
Liz,
name
yeah,
was.
Liz
Yeah.
Allen.
Yeah.
Um, so how he likes Liz Allen, but of course he is the friend group drama with, and there's no real Flash Thompson here. You think it's gonna be
Yeah.
Lonnie, but of course they actually they misdirect it so well,
Yeah,
where you
yeah,
think he's gonna be the bully character like Flash,
yeah.
but he's actually like a pretty nice guy, and Peter really can't help but like him.
Mhm.
And of course, Lonnie, he gets the girl that Peter wants, and you think it's gonna be a love triangle, but they completely go into a different direction with it.
Yeah.
Where you think it's gonna be like, "Oh, wow, that's different." That's, and that was a thing I did like about the show, was, some of those changes as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think, where they kinda go with Lonnie later on in the story, I did like. He gets a lot of attention, and of course, um, they name drop they he becomes Tombstone, the
Mhm.
famous gangster
Yeah.
from the Spider-Man mythos,
Yeah.
a villain. And so, you kinda see someone who kinda gets unfortunately put on the wrong a good person put on the wrong side of the tracks, who joins a gang to help his family, help his little brother out. But unfortunately, as he kinda gets deeper and deeper into it, there's kinda no way out, and he kinda finds himself kinda liking the lifestyle over being the high school jock. but he's kind of
Mhm.
a good guy, so he doesn't really feel like a bad guy, you know, in a very different turn from, say, like Flash Thompson.
Yep.
So yeah, I will say that that is a positive of it, and the way they kind of go from like setting up the your usual Spider-Man tropes to kind of breaking it later on. I think as we talked about in originally, we were like, not for me. But as it kind of goes on, you kind of get more into the show. When they do it, I think it works a lot better.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So, well, do you have anything else to say on his kind of like friend group or anything, or should we talk about some of the villains?
Let's see. Yeah, I definitely have some stuff to say about the villains. Um, yeah, yeah. Why don't we move on? You want to go on to the villains?
Yeah, let's go to the villains.
Yeah.
So, of course, as we all say with Norman Osborn, he becomes Green Goblin, but they keep him as Norman Osborn
Mhm.
for pretty much. And I think the way he kind of feels like a good guy, but they kind of show hints of it later and later
Mhm.
on.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool the way they kind of twist the line with great power comes great respect.
Yes.
Feels like a very Norman Osborn line.
Yep. Totally.
I thought that was very cool.
Yes.
Even if and but the big villain here is Scorpion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of Scorpion, Mac Gargan in this?
Yeah, Scorpion was cool. I remember when I read old Spider-Man comics, Scorpion was no joke. Scorpion was like one of Spidey's most formidable enemies. Yeah. And we haven't seen a whole lot of them in TV and movies, right? Um, he appeared as like a regular dude in the Tom Holland movies, and there was a very different looking Spider-Man or different looking Scorpion in uh, Into the Spider-Verse, right? So we really haven't seen the comics Scorpion at all in TV and movies until now. Here we get to see him, and he does look a lot like the original Scorpion from OG Spider-Man comics. And yes, he is very powerful. So, um, yeah, I was digging it. I felt like the Scorpion we saw was very much the Scorpion I was introduced to way back when, with the added twist that he had like a blade at the end of his tail, much like a real scorpion, right? I think in the original comics they toned it down by making him not have like a blade at the end. It was more of a blunt object he was attacking Spidey with. But that blade at the end really upped the danger factor, right? And this show actually is more violent than you might think. Yeah. Yeah, I thought Scorpion was a welcome addition here.
Yeah, I did dig Scorpion. We haven't seen Scorpion in a while. He's been always a favorite villain of mine, but we've never really gotten like a good Scorpion like show. Anything with Scorpion in it, really,
Yeah, yeah,
in Spider-Man media. At least not for a while. That's out of like a video game boss here and there.
yeah.
So it was cool to see him finally, have his moment. And of course, he gets several episodes and a few fights with Peter.
Hmm.
And yeah, the blood caught me off guard. I
Yeah.
was not expecting to see blood in this show, but yeah, the fights with him were pretty violent,
Hmm.
which was very nice. I liked it.
Yeah.
um, so what? I guess another big villain. He wasn't in nearly as much, but of course, with that they have Doctor Octopus.
Yes.
who is very much looking like his comic book form, but there's a few things very different about Doc Ock here.
Mhm.
So how did you feel about this version of Doc Ock?
Yeah, what you mentioned, the look was cool because it was straight out of the comics, straight out of the old comics, like, um, I would say, like the John Romita Doctor Octopus, not so much the original, like, Ditko Doc Ock, but yeah, the Romita Doc Ock. He had the orange green and orange suit, right? Um, and he had like that bowl cut, you know, and the glasses. So yeah, straight out of like John Romita Spidey comics, which is great. But I think what you're alluding to is you never actually see him wearing the tentacles, right? You do see the tentacles, but they're like kind of standalone. So it is a different Dr. Octopus. Um, and he is different too in that he's almost like, I don't know, like an arms dealer or something. So it's a little different in that respect also. But I just thought it was cool. He was in this season. He was in it quite a bit, and he was quite a menace. And yeah, like I dug him. Like with the basically all the villains, I was really enjoying it. Like Spider-Man is known for having a great rogues gallery, and this season really played it up. So kudos for sure.
Yeah, like they definitely teased the arms, but you never see the arms. I guess they're saving that for season 2.
Yeah.
Instead his big moment is features a lot of like traps
Hmm.
around just kind of, just around the room when the SWAT team is coming for him.
Yeah.
They do that, and that's kind of when Iron Man comes in because he's able just to walk through all the different guys because he has all the different traps and is able to dispatch them well. So that was something different, not something I was expecting. I was definitely expecting the arms
Yeah.
to come out and like his that would be his big moment. So I have a feeling that will be the big guy in season 2. Of course, maybe and as well as when they actually show off Green Goblin because they only showed just the glider this time.
You do see the glider. That was
Yeah,
fun. Yeah, that was cool.
yeah, and the
The
fight.
glider actually saves Peter's life when you see it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's different. So yeah, and the fight with Scorpion.
Hey, little trivia question. In Spider-Man comics, who was the first supervillain to face Spider-Man ever? Do you know?
Would that be the Chameleon?
Correct.
Ah,
And he
yeah,
is
that's
in
right.
this season also. Yeah.
He does make an appearance
Yes.
in almost like a bit of a twist.
Yeah.
'Cause, he's revealed as someone or you see him with the mask off first,
That's right. Yeah.
'cause, he's getting broken out of jail by his friend with, like I think she had, like, the big swords or like, I didn't even know if she was supposed to be a villain, 'cause they show off, like, some one-off villains, kind of at the very
Yeah.
beginning before they get into the bigger ones,
Hmm.
and I had no idea who she was, but she breaks him out of prison, and the Spider-Man fights her, and then he kind of has a change of heart and kind of helps out Spider-Man, but it is later revealed that he is the Chameleon.
Yeah. That's cool.
So I thought that was a nice little reference right there. And of course, the Chameleon's also a character that very underrepresented in Spider-Man media. So he only got a
Yeah.
little tease
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. He was only in it for a little bit, but like what we were talking about with Doc Ock, he looked very much like OG Comics Chameleon, which was great.
Yeah. So, well, here's a question for you. Any villains that you didn't see that you want to see in season 2?
Oh, yeah, I never really thought of that, But like this show is very tantalizing in terms of like having more villains, right? Because the look of the villains in the show is so cool. They're straight out of the old comics. So um whereas with live action, you can't make it too close to source material because it can get kind of silly looking, right? But with animation, particularly the animation style of this show, which is in itself quite retro, it's fine to have the villains look just like the villains from the comics, right? So I mean, yeah, like all the old school villains, like old school Vulture and Electro and Sandman, Lizard, bring them out, and make them look just like those old comics. I would love that. Craven the Hunter, all those guys. Why not?
Yeah, I think Craven would be a really cool one. Vulture, seeing some of the old the villains in the kind of their older attire,
Yeah.
because the it does really have that like Ditko art with the way Spider-Man looks,
Hmm.
or the way I guess Peter Parker looks,
Yeah.
specifically with the round
Yeah. The
glasses.
big glasses are so Ditko. It's super cool.
Yeah, and the way they kind of put in the like comic panels.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that too.
I think they do a lot of work to make sure it's a very like um it feels like you're reading a comic, you know.
Yeah.
There's a title card that looks like a comic page or a comic cover. So, it would be cool to see more of some of the classic Silver Age Spider-Man villains. Even though you kinda see where they're going. It's like, okay, they're gonna have Doc Ock, they're probably gonna do Venom. They've already introduced the symbiote one, so okay, we're probably gonna get Venom,
Right.
and of course, Green Goblin. But I think,
Yeah.
Vulture, Kraven, let's see, just your classic Sinister Six villains, even if they don't
Yeah.
become the Sinister Six, that seems like something probably for later.
Yeah.
But all right, I guess with that, do you have any other kind of thoughts that you want to say? Any other random good or bad thoughts about the series?
Random thoughts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't get to.
Well, we were talking about the animation style, so I wanted to chime in a little bit more on that because I really like the animation style of the show. Um, it's cool because it's modern, but the illustration style is super retro, So like you're saying, a lot of the original Steve Ditko character designs are in here. Most notably, Peter Parker's glasses, those big, huge, round glasses. They are in the show directly from original Ditko art, right? We're talking about Amazing Fantasy 15, Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man #1, all that. And I mentioned John Romita before, but John Romita is his style is all over this show also. The Doc Ock is the Romita Doc Ock, and I think just overall the style is a little more Romita than Ditko, but their DNA is like all throughout, and that's super cool. I was really enjoying that. Um, like you're alluding to, the way the scenes progress, it feels very much like you're reading a comic book. You can see the panels at times. Love that. So yeah, it just made for a very aesthetically pleasing experience. So just that alone, just looking at this show was a lot of fun, I will say.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I have I'll say I have a bit of an opposite opinion. No, not quite opposite. I think that there's some things I enjoy about the style of the show, but I was not a fan of the animation. I think that still images of it looked good. and like I kind of enjoyed the style, but I think the animation quality for me suffered pretty badly. I think the fights looked really clunky, the movement was very stiff. The punches just did not feel like they had much weight to it. And I think you can really see it, especially if you compare it to say X-Men 97 from last year, where X-Men 97 had these really fluid fights. It had a very similar style where it was had this like CGI look to make it look 2D, but it was really a 3D show. And it had like a but the fights were so much more fluid. The color I thought was much better handled, the lighting. Whereas this one, I thought it looked really flat, and yeah, I think that was a pretty big negative for me. Was overall the animation, even if I liked the design of it.
Hmm.
But hopefully that is something that can improve, improve with later seasons. Usually
We'll
that
see.
does.
Yeah, I can't argue with you too much there. I do kind of agree on that. Like the animation style looked cool, but the the character movements, yeah, they were a bit odd. And yeah, clunky. Definitely clunky. I it makes me think like were they doing that on purpose? Like because it made me think of like the old 60s Spider-Man cartoons where like the finger pointing stuff, all that stuff we know. It almost kind of looked like that, right? It was like the movement was as clunky as that. It was almost like were they trying to replicate that? Because yeah, the fight scenes in particular didn't look quite right. They were not smooth. So, yeah. Yeah, I thought it was cool that there was a lot of Spidey action in the show, but yeah, like you're saying, um, it was a little rough. It was not the smoothest in animation action for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. So, that's I guess that's overall, I think, my biggest complaint.
Hmm.
But all right, well, let's see. Do you have any other thoughts
Yeah,
you
I
want
had
to get
some
out?
other some other random thoughts. I will say this, I really liked the theme song a lot.
Yeah.
That almost kind of surprised me because if you were to tell me that they made a hip hop version of the original 60s cartoon theme song, I would be like, really? And I would probably think it would be quite bad, to be honest. But I was digging it, like uh normally with shows, I'll watch the opening credits for the first episode, and then for subsequent episodes, I'll just skip, right? There are notable exceptions. I think we talked about this before, but with X-Men 97, like I would crank that theme song every time. Yeah. For this one, I didn't watch the opening credits every episode, but I definitely watched it more than once, and I was digging that hip hop theme song. Definitely, I liked it a
Oh, yeah.
lot.
I'll admit I got some diminishing returns personally on it.
Okay,
I was like, oh, this is
fair
kind of
enough.
cool, but I think it kind of graded to me after. I'm like, all right, skip, skip.
Yeah, I'm good. Gotcha. Okay, so I did want to go back to um the the origin stuff a bit more because I have some more to say here. Um Also about Peter Parker in general. We haven't talked about Peter a whole lot
Oh,
actually,
yes, we
right?
haven't.
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about the friends and the villains, but not so much about Peter, right? Or Aunt May. So yeah, Peter and Aunt May, notably, I think, are very much like the Peter and May from the Tom Holland movies. I think they're very similar. It's like a younger Aunt May than other portrayals. And Peter himself, he sounds like Tom Holland. He kind of behaves like Tom Holland in those Spider-Man live action movies. He to me, he was very reminiscent of that, and for that reason, I kind of found Peter and May a bit uninteresting in this show, just because it's, like, familiar territory, you know? So there's that, but really what I wanted to chime in on is this whole origin story thing, which we've talked about, but I wanted to talk about a little bit more because, yeah, there are certain things with Spider-Man that really have to be there. You know, like in the Spider-Verse movies, they talk about canon events. It's almost like there's no canon event in this show, right? There's no big Spider-Man moment. I almost feel like Miguel O'Hara is gonna send a team of spider people to this universe to allow a canon event to happen because it hasn't happened yet. Like this universe is in danger of disappearing because there's no canon event. Like the whole season, I was thinking, why is Peter motivated to be Spider-Man and to help people? Right? I never really got that answer. You know, like with other Spider-Man portrayals, it's very clear, right? Uncle Ben dies, and Spider-Man or Peter feels guilty that he wasn't there. He was busy being greedy, trying to make money, trying to get girls, and he has this great guilt and he has great power, but he was using it irresponsibly. So he decides to use his powers for good. That's Spider-Man, right? And we've all bought into that. That's why we love Spider-Man. We understand why he's doing this. He's just a normal guy that, you know, most people would use their powers to try to make money and for selfish reasons, right? But there's this big thing that happens that makes him who he is, right? And I'm just not getting that in this show, right? Um, Different Spider-Mans have different moments, right? But there always is something like that, you know, with Miles Morales in Into the Spider-Verse. I think it's Peter A. Parker dying, right? When he realizes, okay, he needs to use his powers for good, right? There's always something, right? Um, Here, I'm just I'm I mean, is it they're gonna have it later kind of thing? But I mean, I watched 10 fucking episodes of this and I'm like, I'm not having it yet, right? So yeah, that's definitely bugging me, obviously. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that front for you, Christian?
Yeah, it does. It is too bad that they skipped it because I guess they could bring it in later, play the long game like they did in No Way Home. Um, because I could definitely see. I think you kind of see where a lot of spaces where this was a bit of a lead into um, the Tom Holland Spider-Man, where you kind of see the pieces of, oh, this was in the MCU and they were going to do X, Y, and Z here, and that's probably why they had this character, and that's probably why they didn't have a canon event, was because I don't, not to say they knew about it happening in No Way Home, but they knew that, okay, we'll leave the big character moment for the movies and we'll just kind of be the fun, or the safe lead in. But I think now that this has its own universe, um, it is missing that. I think that is the big thing that it's missing, because as far as the rest of Peter, it feels like Peter Parker. He's late to he can't hang out with his friends and tell him why he's Spider-Man, that he's Spider-Man. And you see that push-pull there. He's quippy, he's fun. In every other way, he feels like Spider-Man except for kind of the core, the
Yeah,
canon
yeah,
event,
yeah, yes.
and that kind of underlying tragedy. And so I think like, I guess there's a bit of I kind of forget about that a bit as it went on, because you kind of get wrapped up in what's happening
Hmm.
in front of you. But yeah, as you kind of sit back and think about it, you're like, wait a minute, there's something very important missing.
Yeah.
You see it at the beginning but they already kind of bring in time travel here.
Mhm.
I don't know if they'll do time travel again to kind of establish that canon event, but I don't know. Like, what do you think it could be for this? If you could take a guess.
Yeah, like, okay, so what you're saying is, yeah, maybe they are playing the long game, right? They're saving the big Spider-Man moment for later. Um, like I have no idea. Well, okay, actually, I maybe I do have an idea because again, spoiler alert. Guess what? As we find out in the final episode of the season, that Uncle Ben is actually still alive. So because Uncle Ben is still alive, they could still potentially have his death be the big canon event. Peter Parker with great power comes great responsibility moment, right? So they could still have that. Um, so I guess with that said, I mean I'll have that be my guess as far as like that what that moment would be. Um, yeah, well, I'll just say
I
that.
guess so. It's hard to say. Like with Uncle Ben being dead and then coming back, it does seem a little strange, you know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if that's really a change I personally like, you know. And I can imagine, I don't know, like my guess is that it's going to be, say, like one of his friends, you know,
Mm, mhm.
could be Lonnie or Nico. Um, Lonnie, Nico, or Pearl could be one of those three
Mhm.
to get killed off. That might be a bit more like,
Yeah.
say, Gwen Stacy than Uncle Ben moment, but they could have that be the canon event.
Mm, it's possible. Yeah. With Spider-Man stories, there are always stories of betrayal. So, with Lonnie becoming Tombstone, he could potentially go down a villain route. Character betrayal there is possible. Harry Osborn, as we know, always um, has had villain storylines in the past, and betrayal there is a possibility as well. So, yeah, there are, I think, a number of different possibilities for this quote unquote canon event. To me,
Yeah.
it's just annoying that it didn't happen in this season.
Yeah, it feels
Yeah,
like that's such a big part of the origin. If you're gonna tell this origin story in high school,
yeah.
it seems
I
like the
mean,
time to
yeah.
do it.
I mean, to be fair, you do get little hints of why Peter's doing what he's doing, and it very much is what Tom Holland said in the live action movies. Like he said that when I don't do this, um, the bad things that happen are my fault, right? And I think this Spider-Man has a similar says something similar, right? You know, when I'm not able to do these things, when the bad things happen, I'm the one who's responsible, right? And that's all well and good. You know, that is Spider-Man. That's why Spider-Man does what he does. Um, but there's just no weight behind it, right? Because without that key origin moment, it just doesn't hold as much weight, right? Um, you when when let's say the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is risking his life and risking everything really to fight these villains, you know exactly why he's doing it. Like it was set up early on when Uncle Ben was dying and um and you know everyone knows the story. But like it all that backstory brings so much to the character, right? And uh this Peter Parker, the motivations just like aren't as strong to me. So yeah, there's a bit of a negative for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think one thing I really liked about the '90s show was that they actually skipped over his entire origin. He just started as Spider-Man and he's been Spider-Man. And they don't really go back to it until he recounts the story for somebody else, like
Mm,
like far down the line. But I think in a way that kind of helps you skip the origin that you've seen so many times, just getting straight to the Spider-Man action while still having it feel like Spider-Man, you know? I think that I thought that was a cool approach. But of course, with that one, you can't. That was a Peter already in. I think he was already in college, so he's already been Spider-Man for a few years. So, and I think nowadays Spider-Man and high school seem to be very intertwined.
yeah,
So I don't know if that's something you can do, but it was just something I liked about that. Something that kind of popped in my mind as we were talking.
right on.
But all right, I think with that, are you ready to score this?
I am ready.
All right. So why don't you start? Out of 5, what would you rate your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?
All right. So, I just went on a pretty long rant and kind of went off on a few things, but yeah, don't be misled. I did enjoy the show quite a bit, and I think there's a lot to love with this season. Um, yeah, I will say, in addition to some of the shortcomings I mentioned, the inevitable comparison to the Spider-Verse movies will come up because, like, that's the most recent Spider-Man animation, really, the major Spider-Man animation project to have come out, and those movies are so freaking awesome, right? So it's an inevitable comparison. A comparison maybe you shouldn't, you know, make, just because it's like a totally different thing. One's a show, one's a movie, and we're dealing with different characters and everything. But again, I think it's inevitable that you're going to make that comparison. And if you do make that comparison, like this show does pale in comparison, no question. So there's that said. Um, but yeah, on to some positives. I mentioned a lot of the positives, like the animation style and the theme song and the supporting characters, all great, great stuff. And um another like bottom line kind of thing for me is the show is fun. This is a fun, breezy show. Um like clearly you and I are Spider-Man fans and we have some strong feelings about things, but maybe the approach here is not to take it too seriously and certainly not get too gatekeeper-ish about certain things and just enjoy this. I did watch this show with my son. He's 10 years old. He enjoyed it quite a bit. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching it with him a lot. And yeah, again, maybe a good approach here is to not take it too seriously. It's fun. There's a good amount of action, a good amount of comedy, and it looks cool. And yeah, I'm gonna give this one 3 out of 5.
All right. So I will also give this a 3 out of 5. I think that yeah, this show does really capture the fun side of Spider-Man very well, and I did have a lot of fun watching it. And I think that while there are some things that don't feel right, and we have some things we didn't like, I think the overall package is fun. I think once you kind of get into the show, the further you get, the better it gets. Until the final episodes, I was like, man, I can't wait to see what happens next. So I am also feeling a 3 out of 5. Not the best Spider-Man show that I've seen. I think in terms of Spider-Man media, it's okay, but I think it's also a good start. I think that this does lay some good groundwork to improve upon in later seasons. So I would say this definitely is a show worth checking out. I'd also say that this is a show worth checking back in on uh, as it goes on. So 3 out of 5, solid start, but not the best Spider-Man that we've seen, but definitely not the worst either.
Yep, I agree. Well said. All right. With that, we can wrap up the episode. This is Farewell from Christian and Henry.